If you have radio buttons on your website and you want to know which option do your visitors select, this video will help you do that. Hey, my name is Julius and welcome to the Analytics Mania YouTube channel, where I teach how to work with Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. And if you want to stay up to date with GTM, then consider subscribing to this channel. Let's say that you have a form on your website, and one of the questions in that form is using radio buttons. If you want to access the value of that radio button that the visitor selected, I will show you in this video how to do that. In this video, we are going to write together a little snippet of JavaScript code that will access value of a particular radio button. If you don't have time for that and you just want to get the final result, then I will leave the timestamp below the video where you can find that code snippet. However, that code will still need some modification. So it will be much better for you to understand everything if you watch everything that I explain in this video. So here I have a demo page with one question. That question is using radio buttons. And then if I click submit, then the form is submitted. In this video, we are going to focus only on getting the value of the selected radio button. And I am not going to dive deeper into the actual form submission tracking. And if you want to learn more about that in general, then I will add some additional resources below the video. So let's take a look what we can do. You might be tempted to use something like click triggers or click variables in order to access values of the selected radio button, but they will just not work. In order to get the value of the selected value right here, we will need to create a custom JavaScript variable. So let's go to Google Tag Manager, variables, and then in the user-defined variables, click new. Then in the variable configuration, click anywhere and then select custom JavaScript variable. Every JavaScript variable has two requirements that must be met. It must be an anonymous function, or in other words, it must look like this, where just you enter function without the name, then open and close parentheses, and then open and close curly braces. And then that function must return something, or in other words, there must be a return statement. So this is like a template of the code that you should always have included in your custom JavaScript variable. Now let's go back to the website. And actually throughout this video, I will be jumping between this tab and my Google Tag Manager interface. So don't be confused by that. So basically on this demo website, I will be using a JavaScript console to write some little pieces of code, and then later I will incorporate them in this code right here. So on my demo website, I will enable the developer tools. I can do that by clicking three dots right here, more tools and developer tools, and then you should go to console. If you see something right here, you just can clear it, and then I can focus on this form. Or actually, since this form is fairly short, I think that it will be more convenient for me to switch and actually to move this console to the sidebar. So I can click on three dots right here and then switch from this view to this view. Since we are going to work with these elements and we want to access their values, there is a method that we can use, and that is called query selector. Or actually, in this case, we will play around with query selector and query selector all. So to use query selector on any element of a page, we should type the following command: document and then query selector. There are two methods that are quite similar. The first one is query selector, the other one is query selector all. This one will return the first element on a page that matches a certain criteria that we will actually later define in this video. If you choose query selector all, it will return the list of all elements on a page. So now, just for playing around and for inspection, let's use query selector all. Then let's open and close parentheses, and here we have to enter a thing called CSS Selector. Now, I will not be diving deeper in this video what they are, but this video presumes that you already have some basic knowledge about them. And if you have no clue what CSS selectors are, then take a look at my intermediate/advanced Google Tag Manager course, and you will find the link to it below the video. So to enter the CSS selector, we have to open and close single quotation marks like that. And then we have to enter something. Now, at this moment, we don't know what should we enter. Therefore, we should actually inspect these elements to check what kind of attributes do they have that we could use in our CSS selector. Because CSS selector will allow you to find certain elements on a page that match the criteria. So I will do the right click on any of these radio buttons and then inspect. In my case, radio buttons are included in this paragraph, so I will click on this triangle to expand it. And here I see 3 inputs, the first input, the second input, and the third one. And when I hover my mouse right here, for example, you will see that it is also highlighted right here. So this one is highlighted, this one, and this one. What you will notice is that their type is radio because these are radio buttons, and also they have the same name because they are related to the same topic. The question is, what services are you interested in? And all of these radio buttons are related to services. So therefore we have services, services, and services. And also they have different values like value 1, then value 2, and value 3. So if we go back to the console, we should enter the CSS selector that is looking for elements where the name is services. So let's go back to the console and then enter like this. If we want to target an element based on a certain attribute, and in this case the attribute is name, the CSS selector will look like this. We have to open and close square brackets. Then we enter the name of the attribute that we want to access, and this is right here, name. And then we are looking for a particular value. So this is the equal sign and then open and close quotation marks. Now between them, we have to enter the value of the name that we are interested in. And this is services, services, and services. So just enter services. And you can already see the preview that this command will return 3 inputs. And if I hit enter and expand it right here, you will notice input 1, input 2, and input 3. This is a good sign because in some situations, you might end up having too broad CSS selector. And that might return, let's say, not 3 radio buttons, like in this case, but let's say 20 or 30 or even more. So if you get too many elements returned by this particular command, you have to write a more specific CSS selector. And again, in my course, I teach not only what they are and how to use them, but also I give some tips how to learn that topic faster. Because by understanding CSS selectors, you will unlock some really powerful things. So this looks promising. However, there's one more thing. Remember, I want to get the value not of all 3 radio buttons, but only of that one which is selected. And in CSS, you can enter this if you want to get the value of the selected radio button. Enter this and checked. And now if I hit enter, I will get a list only of 1 element. And if I hover mouse on it, you will notice that the correct element is selected. So this CSS selector works fine. And we are going to use it in our custom JavaScript variable. As I've previously mentioned in this video, we had 2 options. One is query selector all, and the other one is query selector. So query selector returns the first element that matches this CSS selector. And in our case, we actually want to do that. We want to get the first element that matches this particular condition, and that will be the full audit, or actually, well, this option in the radio button. So now, instead of this code, we should just remove the all word, and you will notice that this command will return the input, which is this one. However, right now we are getting too much information. We are getting name, we're getting type, we're getting value. And if I wanted to access the value of this radio button, I would like to get just this part, which is full audit. If I selected, let's say, the other option, and then I would enter the same command. By the way, if you want to repeat the same command that you previously used, you can just press the up button in your keyboard and it will work like that. Then hit enter. And now this returns the other because this is the other. So how can I access only this particular value right here and not get this entire element right here? So I can do that by repeating the same command, but entering dot and value. And now it returns just the value of that particular element. So if I click on consulting and then repeat the same command, it will return consulting. So now you might want to copy this and then probably paste it right here. Now, some of you who are watching this video and who are a little experienced with JavaScript, you might say that this is not a valid code because on some pages, this will throw error. So now I will show you this as a bare minimum option, and later I will show you a bit more elegant and a better solution that developers will also kind of approve. So now I will just name this, let's say CGS and services radio button, and then click save. And now let's test what will happen with this code. So click preview, then enter the URL of the website where you have that radio button, click connect, And now if I click the consulting option and then go to the preview mode of Google Tag Manager, I will see the click event right here. And in the variable section, this custom JavaScript variable will return consulting. Now, if you don't see the click event right here, you must have at least one click trigger created in your Google Tag Manager container. And one of the possible configurations could look like this. By having this trigger, you are actually enabling Google Tag Manager click tracking. Now, if I go to the demo page and click another radio button, then I go to Tag Assistant, and on this latest click, I see another value right here. So this is working fine on this page. However, in the past, what would have happened with Google Tag Manager is the problem if we go to another page where these radio buttons don't exist. So if I go to the demo page and let's say go to my home page and then click any element on a page, let's see the background, maybe this text. And then if I open the console, I would have seen some errors. For example, if I click here, I would have seen something, but right now I don't see any errors. So it looks like Google Tag Manager is automatically handling those errors, and if they are dispatched by the variable, they are not displayed in the console. Now, why would that error would appear at all? Well, because if I repeat that very same command right now and hit enter, you will see this error. Cannot read properties of null. In other words, there is no element on a page that matches this CSS selector, and since that element does not exist, it returns null, and we cannot access a value of null. Therefore, we get this error. So in this situation, the variable just returns undefined. However, if you want to learn how to write a more valid code, and maybe a developer is also involved in this project, and you just don't want to make the fool out of yourself, there is a more valid way how you can write this code and handle this kind of errors. So if we go back to Google Tag Manager, to variables, and then open our custom JavaScript variable, now we can edit this code and make it more valid. Basically, we are going to prepare this code and make sure that it checks first if the element exists at all. And if the element exists, then we will return the value. And if the element is not present on a page, then the variable will just do nothing. So let's first copy this part of the code and test it on a page where we don't have the radio buttons. So as I've said, it will return the error. But if we activate this code without the value, it will just return null. But this is not an error because it is not highlighted in red. So now here's what we can do. We can declare a variable, and in Google Tag Manager custom JavaScript variable, we can do that by entering var and then the name of the variable. And that can be anything you want. For example, it can be element, it can be L or something like that. But let's say that I will use L. And then we add a value to it like that. However, remove that value because we will use that a little later. And now hit enter. It will show you undefined, so that is perfectly fine. Now, if I enter L, it will return null because there is no element on a page that matches this CSS selector right here. However, if I go to the previous page where we have that radio button list and then enter the same code like this, where I define the variable and then enter L, it will return the input, which is selected. So this is the expected behavior that we want to have when it comes to this variable. So now let's copy this row of code and paste it in our custom JavaScript variable. We have to paste it above the return statement like that, but after this syntax right here. Now let's enter semicolon. And now, as I've said, we have to check if this element exists on a page. And if it does, then we will return its value. If it's not, then the variable will just do nothing. And there are several ways how we can do that, but the simplest one for JavaScript beginners, in my opinion, would be just to use the classic if statement. So it can look something like that. If, and then let's open and close parentheses because here we're going to enter the condition. And if we just want to check if the element exists at all, we can simply just enter the name of that variable like that, if L. So if this variable exists and actually, returns something positive because as you remember, that null was a negative thing. Because if I enter like that and then check the L variable, it contains a negative value, which is null. So if L variable returns some positive value, or in other words, there's a term called truthy, then we want to do something. And that something should be surrounded by curly braces like that. Now let's open that and then let's enter the return statement. So return and return the value of that L variable. So let's enter L.value. So in other words, we have declared this variable and its value will be the element that is returned by this method. And here we are just entering the name of this variable, which is basically this, and dot value. So in other words, this is the same as this. And since we already have the return statement right here, we don't need that old one right here. So to sum up, we have declared a variable, and that variable will be this element on the page. If element on the page exists, return its value. If element on the page does not exist, then this will never be activated and the variable will return undefined. In fact, there is a very quick way how can you validate this kind of code in your JavaScript console of the browser. Because if you just copy paste the code like this and go, let's say, to this page and enter the code and hit enter, you will get an error because this kind of anonymous function is not allowed to be activated in the console. However, if you open parentheses, paste the entire code, then close it, open and close it again, you convert this function into a thing called immediately invoked function expression. Or in other cases, it is also known as IFI, like that. So now, if I activate this code, it will be executed and it will return undefined. And this is expected because there is no radio button right here. However, if I go back to the page where we have that radio button test and activate that code once again, it will return the full audit. If I switch to other and then activate the code again, it will return other. So it looks like this is working fine. So if this kind of expression works well for you, this means that this code is valid and developers who might be involved in your configuration will also approve this. So now you can save this variable and use it whenever you need it. It also makes a good practice to click the preview button in Google Tag Manager again and test whether this variable works fine in the website as well. So now I have this demo page, the tag assistant is connected. If I click the first radio button, that click event will show consulting, then full audit will show right here, and other will be displayed right here. However, keep in mind that this kind of tracking method will work with forms that do not redirect a visitor to another page or does not refresh the page. Because if the page is reloaded or the page changes, that click information, that radio button data, it will be lost. You won't be able to access that in your Google Tag Manager preview mode. If you're dealing with forms like Ajax form that just displays the success message after you click submit, then you can definitely access that radio button because the selection of the button still remains on a page. If you want to get more familiar with form tracking in general, then take a look at the description of this video where I will share a link to another blog post. That blog post does not include the radio button tracking, so basically you will just need to combine the knowledge of that blog post and this video. And if you ever face another situation where you need to read the radio buttons once again, this is the final code that you need to use. You just basically need to change this part right here, which is the CSS selector that returns the radio button. So if, for example, I do inspect element and the name right here is not services, but I don't know, something else like city or maybe something even else, then you will need to enter it right here. For example, like this, cities or city or something like that. And this leads us to two requirements that must be met in order for this code to work, or actually maybe even more. So this code will be looking for elements that have the name parameter, and it must be, let's say, if this is services, then the code must be looking for services. And also it must be a radio button, so it means that it will support the checked option right here. So when you have this code, just create a variable, which is custom JavaScript variable, paste this code, edit this part, save the variable, and voila, this variable will then start returning the values of selected radio buttons. Remember, if the form refreshes the page or redirects to another page, the value of the radio button will not be available on that next page. If you found this video useful, hit the thumbs up button below the video because it helps me continue working on this channel. Also, if you want to learn more about Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics 4, then consider subscribing to this channel. My name is Julius, this is Analytics Mania, and I'll see you in the next video.